Hello and welcome. Today is my birthday, and to celebrate, I will be spreading the message of antinatalism. Because if I can prevent even one innocent sentient being from coming into existence, maybe this won't all have been for nothing. Antinatalism is the philosophical position that procreation is morally wrong because suffering and death are inherent to life. There are two main arguments for antinatalism. The first is philanthropic. This is the position that every being is a potential victim. If you do not have a child, that child can never be harmed. The second is misanthropic. This is the position that every being is a potential perpetrator. If you never have a child, that child can never harm others. Because the arguments that antinatalists make are so compelling, instead of being presented with logical, well-thought-out counter-arguments, we are instead bombarded with countless logical fallacies and attempts to misrepresent our philosophy by accusing it of being things that it is not. Antinatalism is accused of being pro-death, anti-woman, eugenics, and eco-fascist. I have seen videos debunking all four of these accusations, but I have yet to see a video addressing the claim that antinatalism is a cult. So here I am to examine this claim by using Stephen Hawson's bite model of authoritarian control. We are going to see if this is a valid criticism or a gross mischaracterization. I was inspired to make this video by a YouTuber named Catherine Klein. Catherine posted a video analyzing whether veganism meets the criteria for being considered a cult, and arguments made against antinatalism are quite similar to arguments made against veganism, in the sense that a lot of cognitive dissonance is required to defend the barbaric atrocities that humans commit against non-human animals, just like a lot of cognitive dissonance is required to defend procreation. The bite model was developed by cult expert Stephen Hawson to determine if a group is a cult. BITE is an acronym. The B for behavioral control, I for information control, T for thought control, and E for emotional control. So we are going to take a look at the characteristics of a cult and examine whether they apply to antinatalism. Stephen Hawson's website has 3 categories: does not apply, somewhat applies, and absolutely applies. I added a 4th category, which is that the descriptor applies to natalism, the antithesis of antinatalism. Part 1, behavioral control. Number 1, regulate individuals' physical reality. This is a pretty vague statement, but I'm going to go ahead and say that this does not apply to antinatalism. 2, dictate where, how, and with whom the member lives and associates or isolates. Antinatalists do not care who you live with or associate with. They simply do not want you to procreate. 3, regulate when, how, and with whom the member has sex. Antinatalists are against birth, so they definitely would encourage people to only have intercourse if they are using some form of contraception. While having protected sex is encouraged, there is no antinatalist sex police regulating the lives of antinatalists, so this does not apply. 4, control types of clothing and hairstyles. If you're an antinatalist who is not vegan, this talking point is going to make you uncomfortable, and it is supposed to make you uncomfortable because claiming to be against birth and suffering while also putting your money toward birth and suffering is morally inconsistent. Antinatalism itself may not control types of clothing and or hairstyles, but it is important to note that antinatalism and veganism are sister causes, and veganism does forbid certain types of clothing. If you are vegan, you are not supposed to wear leather, fur, or silk because veganism mandates that you do not support animal exploitation. However, being told that I should live in line with my morals does not make me a victim of cultish brainwashing. If you acknowledge that antinatalism and veganism are sister causes, you would have to admit that this one does somewhat apply. If you're a believer that antinatalism and veganism are entirely separate causes, you're incorrect, but I would understand if you were to say that you do not think this one applies. 5, regulate diet, food and drink, hunger and or fasting. This also applies to a certain extent if you believe that antinatalism and veganism are intertwined. Vegans do not eat animals, and they do not eat or drink anything that comes from an animal. But there are at least 80,000 edible plants to choose from, so veganism is not forcing anyone to starve. 6, manipulation and deprivation of sleep. This does not apply to antinatalism, but it does apply to natalism. A lot of people who choose to procreate only do so because of societal pressures and false expectations of what pregnancy and parenthood, and especially motherhood, are like. If people knew the truth, fewer people would procreate. Pregnancy is constantly portrayed as a beautiful thing in most forms of media. Natalists conveniently forget to inform people about the risks that come with pregnancy, the fact that people go blind and lose teeth due to being pregnant, the fact that your entire vagina and anus can tear to the point that it cannot be fixed, the fact that people die from being pregnant, the fact that being pregnant is more dangerous than being a member of the United States military. Antinatalists do not have to manipulate people to get our point across because what we say is objectively correct. As for sleep deprivation, antinatalists may experience it, but it's unrelated to them being antinatalists. Natalists experience sleep deprivation as a direct result of choosing to procreate. 7. Financial exploitation, manipulation, or dependence. No. 8. Major time with group indoctrination and rituals, and or self-indoctrination, including the internet. No. Antinatalists can interact with each other as much or as little as they want to. 9. Permission required for major decisions. No. 10. Rewards and punishments used to modify behaviors, both positive and negative. No. 11. Discourage individualism, encourage groupthink. No. Antinatalists disagree with each other quite frequently. Obviously, there's some level of groupthink, but that just comes with the territory of subscribing to a niche philosophy. 12. Impose rigid rules and regulations. The only rule antinatalists technically need to adhere to is to believe that procreation is unethical. An antinatalist can procreate 10 times if they want to. They would not be a good antinatalist. They would not be a morally consistent antinatalist, but they would be an antinatalist nonetheless, as long as they acknowledge that what they're doing is unethical. That's not particularly rigid. 13. Punish disobedience by beating, torture, burning, cutting, rape, tattooing, or branding. No. 14. Threaten harm to friends and family. No. 15. Force individual to rape or be raped. No. Human rape victims and rapists would not even exist if it were not for natalism. While natalists might not actually outright encourage rape, they do enable it. 16. Encourage and engage in corporal punishment. Antinatalists pride themselves on being empathetic and logical people, so they would be the first to take a stance against corporal punishment, as antinatalism is anti-suffering and corporal punishment causes suffering. Obviously, not all natalists support corporal punishment, but corporal punishment is a concept that was created by natalists and continued by natalists, so I would say that it applies to natalism. 17. Instill dependency and obedience. No, antinatalists are not dependent or obedient to an antinatalist cult leader because there is no antinatalist cult leader. However, natalists do everything in their power to make sure that children are dependent on them and obedient to them. 18. Kidnapping. No, if anything, this applies to natalism because kidnapping would not exist without procreation. While the average natalist does not encourage kidnapping, kidnapping only exists because of natalism. 19. Beating. No, that's something that natalists do. 20. Torture. No, antinatalists are trying to limit torture as much as we possibly can. Breeders are the torture enablers, and natalists are the torture apologists. 21. Separation of families. No. 22. Imprisonment. No, nobody would be in prison if it were not for natalism. 23. Murder. Antinatalists are not murdering anybody. Our entire philosophy is based in empathy, logic, and harm reduction. Murderers and murder victims would not exist without natalism. Part 2. Information control. 1. Deception. A. Deliberately withhold information. Like I mentioned earlier, pregnancy is incredibly dangerous and has the potential to be very traumatic. Parenthood and especially motherhood tend to be incredibly stressful and can cause negative health effects. These facts are often hidden, and if more people knew about them, fewer people would procreate. This does not apply to antinatalism at all. We don't need to withhold information the same way natalists do. B, distort information to make it more acceptable. No. Antinatalists don't distort information in order to make it acceptable because we don't need to. C, systematically lie to the cult member. No. But natalists are constantly lying to people by telling them that having children is the key to happiness, even though statistically speaking, people who have children are generally less happy than people who do not have children. Natalists try to fearmonger us about low birth rates, as if low birth rates even have the potential to harm anyone. 2, minimize or discourage access to non-cult sources of information, including A, internet, TV, radio, books, articles, newspapers, magazines, media. No. Antinatalists are free to watch and read whatever they want. B, critical information. No. C, former members. No. D, keep members busy so that they don't have time to think and investigate. No. E, control through cell phone with texting, calls, internet tracking. No. 3, compartmentalize information into outsider versus insider doctrines. A, ensure that information is not freely accessible. No. B, control information at different levels and missions within group. No. C, allow only leadership to decide who needs to know what and when. No. 4, encourage spying on other members. A, impose a buddy system to monitor and control member. No. B, report deviant thoughts, feelings, and actions to leadership. No. C, ensure that individual behavior is monitored by group. No. 5, extensive use of cult-generated information and propaganda, including A, newsletters, magazines, journals, audio tapes, videotapes, YouTube, movies, and other media. No. B, misquoting statements or using them out of context from non-cult sources. Antinatalists don't need to misquote natalists to make them look bad. But natalists are constantly misquoting us and accusing us of believing things that we do not actually believe, so that debunking us is easier. This is known as the straw man fallacy. Natalists do not listen to the arguments we make. They just accuse us of being evil and bigoted. 6, unethical use of confession. A, information about sins used to disrupt and/or dissolve identity boundaries. This does not apply, and I'm fairly sure the vast majority of antinatalists do not even believe in sins. B, withholding forgiveness or absolution. No. C, manipulation of memory. Possible false memories. No. Part 3, thought control. 1, require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth. A, adopting the group's map of reality as reality. This doesn't apply to antinatalism, but natalism requires people to internalize its lies as truth and instills a map of reality that does not match reality. B, instill black and white thinking. No. C, decide between good versus evil. This applies to a certain extent. Procreating is evil, not procreating is good. D, organize people into us versus them, insiders versus outsiders. This somewhat applies because with any social or political movement, this mindset can develop. 2, change person's name and identity. No. 3, use of loaded language and cliches which constrict knowledge, stop critical thoughts, and reduce complexities into platitudinous buzzwords. No. 4, encourage only good and proper thoughts. No, there's no antinatalist thought police. 5, hypnotic techniques are used to alter mental states, undermine critical thinking, and even age regress the member. No. 6, memories are manipulated and false memories are created. No. 7, teaching thought-stopping techniques which shut down reality testing by stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts, including A, denial, rationalization, justification, and wishful thinking. This doesn't apply to antinatalism, but natalists most certainly deny reality, attempt to rationalize and justify their behavior and the behavior of others, and engage in wishful thinking. They envision their child or children as being happy, and when it is brought to their attention that their child may not be happy, they declare that suffering is beautiful. B, chanting. No. C, meditating. No. D, praying. No. E, speaking in tongues. No. F, singing or humming. No. 8, Rejection of rational analysis, critical thinking, constructive criticism. Antinatalism is a position that is reached by deploying rational analysis and critical thinking. Natalism is a position that is upheld by rejecting rational analysis and critical thinking. 9. Forbid critical questions about leader, doctrine, or policy allowed. No. 10. Labeling alternative belief systems as illegitimate, evil, or not useless. Yes, this one absolutely applies. Natalism is illegitimate, evil, and useless. 11. Instill new map of reality. The map of reality instilled in us is in a natalist society does not match actual reality. Part 4. Emotional control. 1. Manipulate and narrow the range of feelings. Some emotions and/or needs are deemed as evil, wrong, or selfish. No. 2. Teach emotion-stopping techniques to block out feelings of homesickness, anger, and doubt. No. 3. Make the person feel that problems are always their own fault, never the leader's or the group's fault. No. 4. Promote feelings of guilt or unworthiness, such as A. Identity guilt. No. B. You are not living up to your potential. No. C. Your family is deficient. No. D. Your past is suspect. No. E. Your affiliations are unwise. No. F. Your thoughts, feelings, actions are irrelevant or selfish. This doesn't apply to antinatalism, but natalists constantly try to convince child-free people that being child-free is selfish and that we should procreate regardless of the negative effects that it could have on us and our children. G. Social guilt. This also applies to natalism. Natalists try to make child-free people feel guilty by fear-mongering them about the birth rate and insisting that having children uplifts the community, and by choosing not to, you are letting your community down. F. Historical guilt. No. 5. Instill fear, such as fear of A. Thinking independently. This applies to natalism because procreation is lemming behavior. B. The outside world. No. C. Enemies. No. D. Losing one's salvation. No. E. Leaving or being shunned by group. No. F. Others' disapproval. We already touched on this. Natalists try to make us feel guilty for not wanting to pop out a baby just for them to suffer and die. G. Extremes of emotional highs and lows. Love bombing and praise one moment, then declaring you a horrible sinner. No. 6. Ritualistic and sometimes public confession of sins. No. 7. Phobia indoctrination. Inculcating irrational fears about leaving the group or questioning leaders' authority. A. No happiness or fulfillment possible outside of group. This does not apply to antinatalism, but natalists constantly try to convince people, and especially women, that the only way to be happy and fulfilled is to have children. B. Terrible consequences if you leave. Hell, demon possession, incurable diseases, accidents, suicide, insanity, 10,000 reincarnations, etc. No. C. Shunning of those who leave. Fear of being rejected by friends and family. No. D. Never a legitimate reason to leave. Those who leave are weak, undisciplined, unspiritual, worldly, brainwashed by family or counselor, and seduced by money, sex, or rock and roll. No. E. Threats to harm ex-member and family. No. So, we have included that antinatalism is not a cult in the slightest. Natalism checks off way more boxes than antinatalism does. So check yourself and stop slandering us. Don't use words you don't know the meaning of, and shut your fucking mouth. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please bear with me. I'm new to making videos, but I am trying. I know y'all saw me stuttering, right? If you have any requests of video ideas that you want to see from me, you can message me on Instagram or TikTok. My username on there is the same as my username here on YouTube, and my profile picture is also the same.